All right, everybody, welcome back to Deep Dive. Today we are diving into a topic that has been around for thousands of years, Buddhism.
Yeah.
And we are going to be focusing on a really amazing text called The Essence of Buddhism, which gives a really nice overview of the history, the ideas, the practices, this tradition that originated in ancient India with the teachings of the Buddha.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about how this philosophy originated so long ago, is now the fourth largest religion in the world, almost 500 million followers. It's been an amazing journey from Asia to the West, influencing cultures and spiritual seeking of so many people.
Absolutely. And our goal here is to simplify things, to get to the essence of Buddhism, so you can walk away from our conversation today with a good understanding of the core ideas and principles. Get ready for some fascinating insights.
Yeah, our mission today is simple. We are going to unpack Buddhism, from the mysterious origins of the Buddha to the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the different schools of thought that have shaped this tradition, all in a way that hopefully makes sense to you.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. It all started with this guy named Siddhartha Gautama, who later became known as the Buddha. He was kind of a wandering thinker, lived in the area of the eastern Gangetic Plain of India about 2,500 years ago.
And this was a time of great social and intellectual ferment, like the Srimanta movement was happening.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, it was a movement of thinkers and ascetics who were challenging the traditional Vedic beliefs and practices. Buddhism emerged within this context.
Kind of like the spiritual rebels of their time.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting? Although we have many ancient texts talking about the Buddha's life, the details don't always match up. For example, his social origin is a bit unclear.
Yeah, like who are his parents?
Well, older texts refer to him as Gautama, or Gautama in Pali, and some call him Siddhartha. He was born in what is now Nepal and grew up near the border with India, spent his life in what we know today as Bihar and Uttar Pradesh in India.
So where in all of this does the royalty come in?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, because some stories mention a King Suddhodana and Queen Maya as his parents, but some scholars question this. They believe he may have come from a community called the Shakya, which was kind of governed by a council, not a traditional king.
So not the traditional prince who renounces everything story.
Right. It seems like we're putting together a historical puzzle with a few missing pieces.
Okay, so then what do we know about Siddhartha Gautama for sure?
Well, what we do know is that he was deeply moved by the suffering that's inherent in life. Sickness, old age, death, all of that. This motivated him to seek a way out.
A liberation from this cycle.
Exactly. The texts tell us that. He studied with renowned meditation teachers, Adrel Kalama, Uddaka Ramaputta, learned some advanced techniques, but he felt it wasn't the whole answer.
So then comes the famous ascetic phase of his life.
Right. He engaged in strict fasting, other extreme practices, thinking he'd find enlightenment that way.
But it didn't quite work out.
Well, at least not in the way he was expecting. This is what led him to focus on dhyana meditation. The tradition says that. While meditating under a sacred fig tree in Bodh Gaya, the famous Bodhi tree, he attained awakening, or Bodhi.
Wow. So he went from extreme asceticism to intense meditation.
Yes, and during this time, he is said to have gained insights into karma, his past lives, the end of mental impurities. This led to his understanding of the middle way.
Okay, so from this awakening came the Four Noble Truths. And this is like the backbone of Buddhist teachings, right?
Absolutely. The Four Noble Truths are foundational. The first is dukkha, which we usually translate as suffering, but it's a broader concept.
Yeah, like a fundamental dissatisfaction with life.
Yeah, it's that feeling of clinging to impermanent things and states.
So it's not just obvious pain, like losing a loved one.
Yeah.
It's also that sense that even good things don't fully satisfy us.
Yeah.
Because we know they won't last.
Exactly. The second noble truth, samudaya, explains the origin of this dukkha.
And where does it come from?
It's rooted in tantra. Yeah, it's translated as craving, attachment, desire. This thirst for things that are fleeting. It's what keeps us spinning on the wheel of rebirth.
Which is known as saṃsāra.
Saṃsāra, yes.
Okay. But then there's some good news, right?
Of course. The third truth, nirodha, tells us that dukkha can end, that it's possible to break free from this clinging.
I like where this is going.
Right. And then the fourth noble truth, marga, introduces us to the path to liberation, which is the famous Noble Eightfold Path, although it's worth noting that other paths are mentioned in some texts.
Okay.
But the Eightfold Path is the one you hear the most about.
Speaking of the Noble Eightfold Path, this is the practical recipe for getting out of suffering, right?
It is 8 interconnected steps or factors, grouped into 3 main areas. First, ethics, which involves right speech, right action, right livelihood.
Yeah.
Then mental discipline, with right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And finally, wisdom with right understanding and right intention.
Wow. It's like a holistic training program for a balanced life.
That's a great way to put it.
It's interesting how it combines ethics, mind, and wisdom, showing that liberation is a process that involves our whole being.
I agree. And in addition to the 4 noble truths, there are the 3 marks of existence.
Which kind of set the tone for reality in Buddhism.
You got it.
Fill me in.
Well, the fascinating thing here is how these 3 marks, dukkha, suffering, anicca, impermanence, and anatta, non-self, combat our basic ignorance of ija.
Which makes us believe that things are fixed, and that there's a solid me.
Right. Some schools even add a 4th mark. Nirvana is peace. But the first 3 are the main ones you hear about.
This idea of anatta, non-self, is probably one of those challenging for us in the West.
I can see that.
We are so used to this idea of a permanent soul.
It's a big shift.
Yeah.
Buddhism invites us to question this notion of an unchanging self. And this is where we understand saṃsāra, this cycle of birth and death. It's this continuous dance driven by desire, ignorance, and karma.
And karma in Buddhism is not like a predetermined fate, right?
It's not.
More about the law of cause and effect.
Exactly. Karma, which literally means action, is what propels saṃsāra. Positive actions, kusala, and negative actions, akusala, plant seeds that will mature later, influencing our future rebirths. The key here is intention satanas. It's the intention behind the action that really matters for karmic results.
So even a thought can have an impact on our karma.
It can. Actions of body, speech, and mind all contribute to creating these karmic seeds, and it's this natural law, operating without divine intervention, that shapes the experiences in the 6 realms of existence.
Just 6 realms.
Yeah, 3 good, 3 bad.
Wow.
That we go through in saṃsāra.
So the ultimate goal of all this is to escape this cycle, to reach nirvana, this word that seems to carry so much meaning.
Nirvana, which literally means extinguishing, is the end of kleshas, our mental afflictions.
Kleshas.
Yeah, things like greed, hatred, and delusion, the things that hold us back.
Okay.
And it marks the end of this cycle of rebirths.
It's a state of self-control. That leads to the extinction of suffering. Interestingly, some texts describe nirvana as empty shunyata, as passing through gates of emptiness, signlessness, and desirelessness.
Yeah, a lot of seemingly contradictory descriptions.
It seems paradoxical, like a state of emptiness. That's also described as complete freedom and happiness.
That's one of the nuances of Buddhism. And it's interesting to note that in practice, many ordinary Buddhists focus more on accumulating merit for better rebirths rather than immediate nirvana.
I see. And how does all of this connect to the idea that nothing exists on its own?
That's where dependent origination, or pratityasamutpada, comes in.
Okay, pratityasamutpada. Tell me about it.
Well, this theory explains how everything in reality is interconnected and dependent upon other things to exist. Except for nirvana, nothing arises independently. A classic example is the Wheel of the 12 Nidanas, which shows how ignorance leads to karmic formations, consciousness, and the whole cycle of dukkha and rebirth.
Interesting.
And this interdependence is also closely tied to the idea of anatta, non-self.
And then this idea of emptiness, shunyata, is even deeper, especially in Mahayana Buddhism.
It is.
What's the difference?
The concept of shunyata has different interpretations. In early Buddhism, it usually refers to the emptiness of the 5 aggregates.
Which are?
Form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness from a permanent self.
Yeah.
In Mahayana, particularly in the Madhyamaka school, emptiness is understood as the absence of inherent existence, svabhava, in all phenomena. Nothing has an independent essence.
So it's even more radical.
You could say that?
In the face of all these complex ideas, Buddhism offers something concrete to hold on to, which are the 3 jewels, or triyatna.
Yes. The 3 jewels are the heart of Buddhist refuge. The first is the Buddha. In Theravada Buddhism, the Buddha is seen as someone who attained awakening through his own efforts, a human teacher with impeccable moral conduct. In Mahayana Buddhism, the view is broader,
How so?
with multiple Buddhas that transcend the world,
Interesting.
and who can be contacted to benefit us.
So the figure of the Buddha changes depending on the tradition. And the second jewel is the Dharma,
The Dharma refers to the teachings of the Buddha. It's the true nature of reality, but it's not something to cling to.
As a fixed doctrine.
Right. More like a practical tool for achieving liberation, like a raft to cross a river. Once you're on the other side, you don't need the raft anymore.
I like that analogy. And the third jewel is the Sangha.
The Sangha is the monastic community, the monks and nuns, who preserve and spread the Dharma. They follow a specific monastic discipline and are seen as a field of merit for lay people who support them.
In exchange for the teachings.
Right.
Okay, and this is where the major traditions of Buddhism start to differentiate more, isn't it? Theravada and Mahayana are the main branches today.
Yes. Theravada Buddhism, which is predominant in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, focuses on individual liberation, nirvana, and the end of the cycle of rebirth. Mahayana Buddhism, which developed more in East Asia, emphasizes the bodhisattva ideal, which is someone who seeks enlightenment.
Not just for themselves.
Exactly, but for all beings. And then we also have Vajrayana Buddhism, which is often considered a branch of Mahayana that uses more esoteric tantric techniques and is practiced mainly in the Himalayan regions and parts of Asia.
So this division into Theravada and Mahayana is also reflected in the practices and paths to liberation.
Absolutely. In the ancient texts, we find several lists of qualities that aid in awakening. The Bodhipakkhiyama?
Bodhipakkhiyama?
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
I could see that.
But generally speaking, the core practices are sila ethics, samadhi meditation, and praja wisdom, which are known as the three trainings.
And the middle way continues to be a fundamental principle.
You got it. Avoiding extremes. The middle way applies both to our daily lives.
Avoiding the pursuit of pleasure and self-mortification.
Right. And to our philosophical understanding, like in the view of rebirth that avoids both the idea of an eternal soul and the idea that we simply cease to exist after death.
And for ordinary people, the 5 precepts are the foundation of Buddhist ethics.
Yes. The Pāṇñaka Sīla are the 5 basic precepts: to abstain from harming living beings, stealing sexual misconduct, false speech, and intoxicants.
Okay.
They are based on the principle of non-harming ahimsa and empathy.
And for monks and nuns, there's a more detailed code of conduct, the Vinaya.
The Vinaya is the disciplinary code that guides the life of the monastic community, including the Patimokkha, which is a set of rules that vary slightly among different schools. It organizes life in the monastery and helps maintain harmony in the Sangha.
So in addition to the rules, there are practices more focused on the mind, like sense restraint, renunciation, and of course, mindfulness.
Sense restraint indriyasamvara is the practice of guarding our senses to prevent negative mental states from arising.
Interesting.
Renunciation nekkhamma is the intention to detach from harmful desires.
Okay.
And we cultivate this through practices like giving, monastic life celibacy. And then mindfulness sati, along with clear comprehension, sampajanya, helps us be fully present, aware of our mental states.
And of course, meditation with its various forms and goals.
Yeah, Buddhist meditation includes developing samadhi, which is a calm, focused awareness, and the practice of dhyana or jhana, which are states of deep mental tranquility.
Yeah.
And within meditation, we have 2 complementary approaches: samatha, which focuses on calming the mind, and vipassana, which aims to develop wisdom and insight.
And to cultivate positive qualities, we have the Brahmaviharas, the 4 immeasurables.
Exactly. Metta, loving-kindness; karuja, compassion; mudita, empathetic joy; and upekkha, equanimity, are both virtues we strive to develop and subjects for meditation.
And some traditions also incorporate more visual and energetic practices like Tantra.
Right. Especially in Vajrayana Buddhism, we see the use of deity visualizations, mantras, and mandalas in meditation.
Interesting.
In Anaturiga Tantra, for example, there are the generation and completion stages, which involve visualizing emptiness and oneself as a deity.
Okay.
It's pretty deep.
And culminating all this, we have the pursuit of wisdom, prajna, and insight, vipassana.
Prajna is the wisdom that understands the true nature of existence: impermanence, non-self-dependent origination. Vipassana is the direct perception of these truths. Overcoming fundamental ignorance is a crucial step on this path to awakening.
So it all comes back to wisdom.
In a way, yes.
Devotion also has a role in Buddhism,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't involve a personal god to worship.
Devotion bhakti manifests through confident trust, sada, and in practices like rituals, prostrations, offerings, and pilgrimages. Objects of devotion include images of Buddhas and bodhisattva stupas and the Bodhi tree.
And the issue of animal ethics and vegetarianism is a recurring theme, based on the principle of non-harming.
Right, although earlier texts allow for eating meat under certain conditions.
Okay.
Many Mahayana texts advocate vegetarianism out of compassion. This is a matter that continues to be debated among Buddhists today.
To conclude this part, it's important to remember that Buddhism began as an oral tradition, and its texts developed over time.
Initially transmitted orally. In languages like Pali, the first canons were only written down centuries later. It's crucial to understand that there is no single set of Buddhist scriptures accepted by all traditions. The volume of Buddhist texts is huge, with different collections and interpretations in various languages.
Now, looking back, how does Buddhism fit into the historical context in which it emerged?
The historical roots of Buddhism lie in Iron Age India, a period of great social and intellectual change, with the rise of the Shramana movement, which challenged established Vedic traditions.
What was that again?
The Shramata movement was a diverse group of wandering ascetics and thinkers who sought liberation from suffering and developed new philosophical and religious ideas. Think of them like the spiritual entrepreneurs of the time.
Okay, so Buddhism emerged within this broader context of seeking and questioning.
Exactly. Buddhism, along with Jainism, offered new perspectives on existential questions.
And after the Buddha, how did Buddhism evolve and spread throughout the world?
After the Buddha's death, Buddhism went through a period of organization and the emergence of different schools of thought. The support of Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE was crucial for the expansion of Buddhism throughout India and beyond. It was during this time that the first Buddhist schools like Theravada and Sarvastivada began to emerge.
And the Silk Road played a very important role in this dissemination, didn't it?
Yeah.
Taking Buddhism to Central Asia and eventually China and other parts of Asia.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't just limited to India anymore.
Right. The contact with different cultures led to new interpretations and developments.
The
emergence of Mahayana Buddhism, with its emphasis on the Bodhisattva and a broader view of the Buddha, was a significant transformation.
And what about Vajrayana Buddhism?
Well, later on, Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism flourished in India, incorporating new practices and influences.
I see. But unfortunately, Buddhism also saw its decline in its homeland.
Yes, from the end of the 1st millennium CE, Buddhism began to lose support in India, partly due to the resurgence of Hinduism, and later with the Islamic invasions.
So it kind of went full circle. Started in India, then spread around the world.
Yes.
But then faded away in India itself.
It's true. But while it declined in India, it flourished elsewhere, like in Southeast Asia and East Asia.
So it's like a tale of two destinies.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
So how did its journey in other parts of Asia go?
Well, the transmission to China, Korea, Japan, Tibet, and Southeast Asia profoundly shaped these cultures. Different schools and practices developed in each region, adapting to local contexts. For example, Zen Buddhism in Japan has its own unique characteristics.
And today, how does Buddhism present itself in the modern world?
Buddhism has faced the challenges of pollinization, modern science, and the rise of Buddhist modernism, which sought to harmonize tradition with contemporary thought. We have seen the emergence of new Buddhist movements.
Interesting.
And a growing presence of Buddhism in the West, with its own adaptation challenges. It's remarkable to see how ancient teachings resonate with current issues.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how such an ancient tradition continues to reinvent itself and find relevance in such diverse contexts.
Yeah.
And to wrap up our deep dive today, what are the key takeaways we should take from this essence of Buddhism?
The main takeaways are the Buddha's quest for liberation from suffering, the fundamental teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which offer a practical roadmap for dealing with life, the understanding of karma and rebirth as ongoing processes, the ultimate goal of nirvana as the cessation of suffering, and the rich diversity of Buddhist traditions and practices that have developed throughout history.
Right. So many different paths to the same destination.
In a way, yes. And this conversation has just been a starting point, a foundation for those who want to explore further.
And for those of you who have listened to us this far, here's a final thought to ponder. Considering this Buddhist emphasis on impermanence and non-self, how might these ancient insights help us deal with the uncertainties and constant changes of modern life?
It's a great question. Something to think about.
Or, considering the many interpretations and the evolution of Buddhist thought over the centuries, what does this tell us about the adaptability and lasting relevance of its core principles?
We invite you to delve deeper into the aspects of Buddhism that most resonated with you. Explore Buddhist texts. Look for practice centers in your city. Research the different traditions. Understanding Buddhism can bring valuable perspectives on our existence and our well-being.
That's it for today on Deep Dive. We hope you enjoyed our exploration of the essence of Buddhism. Until next time.
Bye, everyone.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel